After nearly 2 weeks of airstrikes, the United States has suddenly gone quiet. For the third consecutive night, American bombers stayed on the ground. Oil prices immediately fell, diplomats rushed back into negotiations, and a new question emerged. Has Washington decided to end its military campaign against Iran, or is this simply the calm before a much larger storm? Behind the scenes, reports suggest senior U.S. military commanders warned President Donald Trump that continued strikes had reached the limits of their effectiveness. At the same time, Iran paused what it called its retaliatory attacks, while indirect diplomatic talks quietly resumed. Yet none of the underlying disputes have been resolved. Iran's nuclear program remains intact. The Strait of Hormuz remains vulnerable, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu continues urging Washington to maintain military pressure. What appears to be a pause in fighting may actually be the most dangerous phase of the conflict, because both sides are now deciding whether diplomacy can succeed before another round of escalation begins. The current crisis began nearly 5 months ago and escalated dramatically after the United States joined Israel in launching strikes against Iranian military and nuclear-related targets. Washington argued that the campaign aimed to degrade Iran's military capabilities and deter future attacks against American forces and regional allies. Iran responded by launching what it described as retaliatory attacks against U.S. interests and allies across the Middle East, while threatening maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. Roughly 1/5 of the world's seaborne oil passes through this narrow waterway, making it one of the most strategically important shipping routes on Earth. The fighting disrupted regional stability, pushed energy prices higher, and raised fears of a broader regional war involving multiple countries. Now, however, the pace of military operations has slowed. According to Iranian officials, both sides have effectively paused offensive operations for several nights, while diplomats attempt to reopen negotiations through intermediaries, including Oman. That sudden pause reflects three major strategic realities. The first reality is that military campaigns eventually reach operational limits. Modern air campaigns depend on intelligence, logistics, and precision-guided munitions. They cannot continue indefinitely at the same intensity without producing diminishing returns. Reports indicate senior U.S. military commanders advised President Trump that most pre-planned targets inside Iran had already been struck. Continuing to launch airstrikes against less significant targets would increase costs while producing fewer strategic gains. At the same time, American officials reportedly warned about declining inventories of key precision weapons, including Patriot interceptor missiles and Tomahawk cruise missiles. Although the United States maintains one of the world's largest military arsenals, sustained high-intensity operations consume expensive weapons at remarkable speed. This does not mean the U.S. military has run out of options. Rather, commanders appear to believe that additional strikes should only occur if Iran significantly escalates the conflict again. That military assessment created space for diplomacy. But military logic alone does not explain the current pause. The second reality is that both Washington and Tehran appear to see tactical advantages in slowing the conflict. Iran announced that it had suspended retaliatory operations after U.S. strikes stopped. Officials also confirmed that indirect contacts with American negotiators have continued, while mediators attempt to prevent another escalation. Importantly, neither side describes this as a ceasefire. Instead, both governments continue emphasizing that military options remain available if negotiations fail. President Trump has repeatedly stated that all options remain on the table, while Iranian officials continue warning that they will respond if attacks resume. This creates what strategists call a coercive diplomacy environment. In simple terms, both sides negotiate while maintaining the credible threat of renewed military action. Each government hopes diplomacy will achieve objectives that continued fighting may no longer accomplish. For Washington, priorities reportedly include preventing Iran from disrupting shipping through the Strait of Hormuz and limiting further regional escalation. For Tehran, reducing military pressure while preserving strategic leverage remains the immediate objective. Whether those goals prove compatible remains uncertain. And that uncertainty becomes even more complicated because another key regional actor has very different priorities. The third reality centers on Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has consistently argued that sustained military pressure offers the best opportunity to weaken Iran's military infrastructure and nuclear capabilities. His expected meeting with President Trump therefore carries enormous significance. The two leaders broadly agree that Iran's military capabilities must be contained. However, differences appear to exist regarding timing and strategy. American negotiators reportedly prioritize reopening maritime trade routes and avoiding a prolonged regional war. Israeli leaders remain more focused on ensuring that any diplomatic outcome permanently limits Iran's military capabilities. Domestic politics also matter. Netanyahu faces elections later this year and remains under pressure to demonstrate that Israel's military campaigns have produced lasting strategic results. President Trump faces his own political calculations. Extending another large-scale Middle Eastern conflict could prove politically costly, particularly after repeatedly emphasizing his preference for ending overseas wars rather than expanding them. These different political pressures do not necessarily produce conflicting objectives, but they can produce different timelines and different thresholds for resuming military operations. That means the current pause should not automatically be interpreted as lasting peace. Instead, it represents an opportunity that could either produce negotiations or collapse into renewed conflict. For the Middle East, the coming days may determine whether the region moves toward de-escalation or returns to open confrontation. Even if direct fighting slows, underlying disputes over Iran's nuclear program, missile capabilities, and regional influence remain unresolved. For global energy markets, stability in the Strait of Hormuz remains essential. Any renewed disruption could quickly affect oil prices, shipping costs, inflation, and energy security across Europe and Asia. The immediate decline in oil prices following the military pause demonstrates how closely financial markets monitor developments in the Gulf. It is also important to recognize the uncertainty surrounding several reported developments. Some accounts regarding internal military advice, munitions stockpiles, and diplomatic discussions rely on anonymous officials and media reporting rather than official public confirmation. While the broader pause in fighting is observable, many details surrounding decision-making remain difficult to independently verify. Sometimes the most important moment in a war is not when missiles are launched, but when they stop. The silence over Iran may signal the beginning of diplomacy, or it may simply mark the moment both sides prepare for the next round. The decisions made during this pause could shape the Middle East far more than the bombs that came before it. If you enjoyed this analysis, subscribe to the International Desk, and I'll see you in the next one.